Good evening. In Efir, the news from Ostankiно. In the studio, Sergei Medvedev. And now the chronological sequence of today's events in Moscow. As the Ministry of Defense said, the arrested have been transported to the Investigation Isolation Center in Lefortovoz, Khazbulatov, Rudskoy, Barannikov, Makashov, Dunaev, and Achalov. Well, one can now put a period after the conflicts which arose around the walls of the White House from 7 a.m. this morning. But one may probably not say with full surety that the conflict in Moscow is completely over. It seems that in the White House still did not fall to those who are trigger-happy. That is in reference to the semi-automatic rifles, the sniper rifles, and the grenade propellers. There's no guarantee that the possessors of these weapons will surrender them to the authorities. Today, from 2300 hours to 5 o'clock in the morning the following day, martial law has been declared in Moscow. If anyone cannot produce documents or a permit to be on the streets during these hours, will be detained for a period of up to 3 days to verify identification. And now how events developed in Moscow. We'll begin with the culminating events. Sergei Slipchenko, our reporter. The eternal question. Can joy be built on blood? Thousands of people came from early morning in order to spectate. In this footage, a wounded youth sobbed from pain, and there was a constant flow of bodies being brought to this point. In the morning, from the White House, snipers shot at the militia, but by 12 o'clock they started to shoot at the crowd. Here they are. There was no time to even remove them from here. They lie here by the White House. The video crew of the company Ostankino came by 1600 hours, and by this time the first arrests were made. Here are their faces. Some of them turned to us, full face, that is, to you, the viewers, and one of them said, "If I had a semi-automatic, I would kill you all and the doctors as well." This is the militia and the items which they confiscated from the detainees. This is the identification certificate of their commander. And what is the significance of the human life in this frightening situation? This boy on roller skates received a minor wound and roller skated to the hospital. From there, he came back with his medications. And this man is simply looting. He's carrying a television. These are people of one generation, but diametrically opposing attitudes. A young girl is giving her own sandwiches to a doctor. And these, the protectors of the order, from under the bodies, are removing and carrying away cocoa, vodka, and sugar. And for a second, there was a reprieve in the shooting, and the crowd suddenly moved onto the square. Immediately, the OMON, maybe harshly, is dispersing the crowd to avoid death. I feel that those who really understand what is going on are the doctors. From this morning, how many people have you attended? I think we have sent wounded 30 to 35 people to the hospitals. There have been many killed, and among those killed are mostly civilians. They are heart, neck, and head wounds aimed. It appears that these are sniper shots who were firing at civilians. This is the most amazing. Young boys, 16, 17 years of age. And they're in the building. In the building now there are Cossacks. They entered and are still there, and basically there are corpses. And who transported the wounded to the hospital from 6 in the morning? It was the director of the SP Quorum, Andrei Shostakov, and the deputy director, Vladimir Fedorin. The ambulance service of 03 arrived at 1500 hours. These are the signs of the humane phenomena. On the top of this building are viewers who have set up a viewing platform. One might say an excellent location for snipers. In our society, there's a division between two attitudes of reality, the observers and the helpers. This is the situation at the White House to this hour, and in literal and a figurative sense, it is the Black House. After a 9-hour storming of the building of the parliament by the government forces at approximately 1700 hours Moscow time, there was a mass capitulation which began of the defenders of the White House. There were many who came up with their arms up and directed themselves to the buses which had approached the driveways of the parliament. Among them were deputies and hostages who had been taken previously. Besides them, there were also women and children leaving the house. During the exit of one of the groups from a sniper location, fire was opened up. And in the meantime, there was shooting of spectators, which continued, as well as the military who had assembled by the walls. A few moments before the exiting of the parliamentary group of people with their arms raised, on the top floors of the White House, there was a confrontation between the government troops and the parliament defender. The surrender was preceded by talks with the Minister of Defense, Pavel Gorbachev, with the agitators who arrived by car to the White House. There were no official numbers on the casualties within the Parliament building. We won't speculate at this point. The number could be substantially large. However, we will wait for official facts. But, however, one must note the fact that every third of the so-called protectors of the White House who was detained by the militia in the area of the chain on the Red Presnya looted and seized from the building a telephone or any other type of apparatus that they could grab. In 2 points of confrontation, the militia has arrested more than 60 persons, and their number increases hourly. After Alexander Rutskoy and Ruslan Khasbulatov were detained and then later arrested in the White House at 2000 hours, there were still 300 so-called protectors who were armed and naturally were firing. Therefore, the purging of the White House, as it says in the information notice of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, is extremely complex, and those who are still armed pose a threat to the population of Moscow. The government of the Russian Federation and the heads of the government of the subjects of the Russian Federation, who held a meeting today in Moscow, issued a unanimous statement which expresses full support to all the measures of the president and appealed to all organs of all branches and levels of government to unconditionally fulfill all the conditions of the president, organize uninterrupted functioning of industry, transportation and communications, and to introduce early preparations for the elections of the Government Duma of the Federal Assembly. Citizens of Russia will abstain from unsanctioned meetings and demonstrations. One of the epicenters of the clashes in Moscow was our telecenter Ostankin. I say this with much remorse, because the attack on television was not a surprise either for the government or for the law-protecting organs. This was unanimously called for in the White House, but regretfully the gunmen invaded the building, damaging the telecenter. Blood was shed. It could have been and must have been avoided. However, the opinion is the problem was time. But this does not refer to the brave young division of Spetsnaz who honorably defended us day and night. The crossfire continued in the morning, but truly not as heavily as the evening and night before. The fire had seemed to stop. However, the smell of fire lingered in the entire building of the Olympic television radio, which suffered most under the siege. I will remind you that herein are located the offices of the Television Information Agency Ostankin. Early in the morning, our operation with the assistance of the Division of Knights managed to enter the part of the building VTRK. The quadrant was scorched. Part of the building is without power. The center was shot at by grenade propelling rifles. This walkie-talkie is the only equipment belonging to the patrol which wasn't destroyed. Our colleague was killed, the video engineer Sergei Krasilnikov. Now, the telecenter situation, if not completely calm, it is at least not explosive. There were rumors circulating of a new attack, and another evacuation was being prepared for, but rumors were rumors, and work continues. The center continues to be under strict security. The employees have difficulty even getting to their workplaces. Where were the protective forces yesterday when the siege began? The attack was known of on Ostankin by 4 o'clock, and a crowd assembled at the telecenter telecenter at 6 o'clock. The storming actually began on a literally defenseless television station at 7 o'clock. And what can one say now? These young men are not to blame who have been sitting here in this half-destroyed Ostankiно cafe, hungry and tired. Thanks to them, at the time the shots were heard, we're still broadcasting through Efir. And in twilight, there was alarm. Light for filming was allowed to be turned on for a few seconds. They say that we are surrounded by snipers. Therefore, for us, those who are defending us, it is not easy for them. So there are so many people in military uniforms. Where are you from? We are a special military militia from the Nagorsky region, from various places. All of us are on first assignment, especially the soldiers. And who among you here is in such a situation for the first time? Boys, who's, as they say, gotten stuck for the first time here? What are you saying? We are all here for the first time. Are you not afraid? We were very afraid last night. No, we are not afraid. Only fools are afraid. Are you in any way interested in how the politics of the country will take their course? We have chosen our path to follow Yeltsin, and there is nowhere else to go. We were not able to have a more detailed conversation. The storming of the Olympic Television Radio Center began at around 8 o'clock in the evening. Prior to this, the General Makashov offered the defenders to lay down their weapons, but then the Spetsnaz Dzerzhinsk division and the division of Knights occupied the first floor in the quadrant UASK-3. A militia vehicle was used to penetrate an opening. Windows were broken, tension mounted by the moment. The storm began from a shot from a grenade-propelling unit on the defensive side, and then fire opened up from both sides. It went on for only 1 minute, but it was a real nightmare. By the first explosion of the grenade, a troop from the division of the Knights was killed. This fellow was not yet 20. It was 10 days before his birthday. After the attack, there was an evacuation of the employees of the television center. The attackers began to throw Molotov cocktails into the building. The fire broke out in the security sector and then spread throughout the entire section. The telecenter was held for 20 minutes before the basic forces arrived, managed to hold out all night with choking fumes spreading along the corridors. At the minute, the number of troops, Spetsnaz and Dzerzhinsky, the night units defended the major locations. It was a test of nerves. They awaited backup and reinforcement, encouraged each other that the tanks from Tamansk and Kantemirovsk would arrive. But there were no tanks. 150 troops with a small arsenal surrounded and were fired at from neighborhood bushes and buildings. Just in time was the arrival of the column of the BTR from the battalion Dzerzhinsky. Among the attackers, there were many casualties, and truly one feels sorry for them, who were forced to violate the law by the ambition and evil will of others, the main culprits, for whom human life is meaningless compared to their own private interests. In connection with the events of these days, the Prosecutor General of Russia, Valentin Stepankov, gave an interview to our correspondents. What concerns the prosecutor's office, all the employees of the city, the general prosecutor's office, are all at their usual working posts. The brigades of investigators have started their work on the attack on the television station Ostankiно. That is where our basic workload is now. Another brigade is preparing to investigate the situation around the White House, and I think that soon, inside the White House itself, there is also in existence another plan of investigation which concerns the organizers, the executors, the mechanism of the acts, and also not only that, but the investigative body will study the role of the social formations which took part in these violent acts. And this is what concerns the movement, the Russian National Movement and the Union of Officers. This organization is being investigated under other criminal proceedings. Their leader has been arrested during the attack of the headquarters of the armed forces. And it was not just the Ostankin which was attacked, but a series of other objectives as well. And therefore, we felt a very serious need arise to resort to the methods of criminal prosecution in order to expose the reasons and the conditions of the main participants and organizers of the events. And now, something about the organizers of these events. We have just received a videotape from our agency. It is visual material which is worth seeing, the actual scene of arrest of Khasbulatov, Rudskoy, and Makashov. According to the statistics of the Ministry of Health, as of 1800 hours of today, 29 people have been killed, 264 have been hospitalized as a result of the bloody clash of yesterday and today. This does not include, naturally, the cases from today's attack and storm of the White House. We still have no information on that yet. More than 40 brigades of assistance patrolled near the White House and are sending victims to 12 city hospitals. The Ministry of Health reports through the media that there is a very strong shortage of medications and also blood for first aid. In order to define the number of cases near the White House, the minister says that for now this is impossible. The hospitals of the city, to the hospitals of the city, the injured continue to come in, although their number is very much less than yesterday. There are many that come by foot or are brought with friends. Ambulances simply cannot approach many of the locations of the injuries. The hospital Minsky-Fasovsk is admitting the Ostankin injuries, whereas the hospitals Aptinskaya and Yervogrodinskaya are taking in patients from the White House area. The emergency medications are limited and the materials are limited. At this very moment, we have 90 persons who have come. However, the exact number is not known because 4 more were admitted within the last hour alone. Therefore, we'd estimate that it is somewhere around 97. And are there casualties? Yes, there are casualties. 3 people had died undergoing surgery. And apart from this, 15 bodies were transported here. And the injured continue to flow in. This morning, from the very early morning to this blood transfusion center in the Institute of Minsky-Fasovsk, there was a lineup of donors a few days long. The number of donors is so great, and the capacity on the transfer point is not able to facilitate. Have you been here for a long time? From 10:30, from 9 o'clock. And now your turn is coming up? You are not tired? No, we have been fed. No, this is not fatigue. No, even if they didn't feed us, we would still stand here. And how can it be? People are dying and we can't stand in line? The medical personnel is working around the clock in these small rooms and narrow corridors where during the last few hours several hundreds of people have come through. Blood is only being accepted here and also at the number 20 and number 40 Moscow hospitals, but the injured keep coming in. We will still need donors during the course of all this week. We will expect you. While some give blood, others shoot. And this news is from the publishing complex of the Moscow Pravda. And the head editor of the Moscow paper, Komsomolets Pavel Gusev, said over the telephone that the building was shot at from 2 sides. And from both sides there were snipers in hiding. All of the journalists were forced to lay down on the floor in the hallways. Gusev said that he had information that the gunmen entered the first floor, which was not patrolled by the militia. The forces of the division Amon are present and are repressing the attackers by fire. We have no information on how the clash ended. We hope that by the next broadcast we will know. In this section of the Sadov Circle, you can see regular life here, people walking, going to work, the usual hustle and bustle by the banks and at the stations. And at the station, the situation is stable. The suburban trains are all on schedule, and as well the distant trains are on schedule. There are no delays. The number of passengers is the same as usual workday, somewhere within the vicinity of 22,000 passengers per day. That's the level we're working in. The only problem of passengers is in the functioning of the Metropolitan is that some routes are closed and passengers must go by foot from one station to the other. And for the delays, the passengers are later taken by later scheduled trains. At 6 o'clock in the evening at the Smolensk Square, a large crowd assembled, and as one of the citizens said, it was to see a military show which was free of charge. Today, the Moscow Metro, despite the 2300-hour martial law which was declared, will continue to transport passengers, and it will only be for those who have permission to travel, so as not to be on the streets after the curfew. The House of the Russian Press, which is free now from barricade, which is in the center of the capital, close to the Mos Soviet. Today there was a briefing for the Russian and foreign journalists. The head of the administration of the president, Sergei Filatov, after one of the briefings, gave an exclusive interview for our program. What is your opinion? Will there be immediate action taken? Yes, unconditionally. I know that today the Prosecutor General's office has pressed criminal charges on many different cases. And what information have you now? Tonight, the situation in all the regions was normal. We received many telegrams from leaders of the republics, head of the administrations, that the situation is fully under control. And of course, everyone there was in total shock by what happened yesterday, and they demanded, pleaded, begged, each found his own words to express that today this insanity be terminated and that authority should gain control over the capital so that the flame did not explode and spill over into the neighboring regions. Please, would you say, did our Russian government do everything in order to avoid the bloody drama? I think that the government did everything possible, maybe even more than everything. And maybe there is a basis for those reproaches which are being made against the government for having taken too long, for having too long attempted to continue dialogue with people who are dishonest, who repeatedly violate their duties, and as if didn't understand that the dialogue were a ploy to win time for preparation of forceful actions. I feel that the government, all this time, the government conducted itself by its main objective, which was to avoid bloodshed. Can one now speak about the null variation which Zorkin proposed? It seems he still supports this. Today, it seems that it is probably a personal problem of his own perspective, because of the development of events in life have formed a new political reality from which one cannot return to the situation as described on the 20th of September and do those things which were not done at that time, and to then forget everything that has happened since that time. I think this is absolutely unrealistic. When and how did you decide on your appeal to the Russian people? I decided to do this last night based on the analysis of the developing situation and with the realization of the seriousness of the problems connected to the demobilization of a large percentage of our defense organs, the clear and well-coordinated acts of the opposition within a general agenda, and the awareness of the reality of the intent to seize the levers of power, and as well the awareness that our defense organs today are not just a machine which can fulfill any given order. It is a part of society which is afflicted with the same pains and thoughts as our society. It needs to feel the people's support. Without this, It cannot be used according to its functions. I felt that this was the case, that national support was definitely needed to break the noose of the situation, and I am grateful, very grateful to the Muscovites who have replied and came to our assistance. The latest news from the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia: the situation in the regions, the districts, the areas of the Russian Federation is completely calm. This is confirmed by a series of different agencies. RIA reports that in the Timersk district, all the industries and businesses are operating on schedule. The administration of the district has banned unsanctioned meetings and demonstrations. We must do everything so that the tragic Moscow events were not repeated in our regions. This decision was made at a selectoral council of heads of the executive powers of the cities and regions of the Irkutsk district. On the central square of Novosibirsk, there was a meeting of the democratic forces under the slogan, "There is no civil war." There were 2,000 people participating. The Moscow bloodshed unleashed by the supporters of Hezbollah and Rudskoy did not leave Petersburg impartial. Despite the superficial tranquility, there is internal tension. Thousands of people concerned over the future developments congregated today at the Palace Square, chanting the slogans, "Fascism won't go through." They said that not only humanitarian but also Christian laws were violated. The bloodshed in Moscow will remain on the consciences of Hezbollah and Rudskoy. They resorted to the very last resort. They don't care. They could spit on the people who died. They could spit on the blood which was shed. I don't want to use this expression in reference to the great Russian relic, the Vladimir Mother of God icon. They were indifferent to the prayers of the Patriarch and in the churches for the peace in Russia. They had their own agenda to gain only the power which will be absolute for them and for all of us. But we don't want it, but they want only this. And if the representatives of the Soviets, the lower Soviets, and the heads of the administration had unanimously supported the president at the moment when he issued his decree, then I'm certain that these provocations which occurred in Moscow would not have happened. Therefore, I feel that the regional leaders must also share part of the blame for what happened in Moscow. In Sarajevo, it is calm. The industries are operating on schedule. There is no turmoil in the streets. And to preserve the control of the region and not allow carnage was an appeal made at a meeting of democratic forces near the television radio Saratov station. Those participating expressed full support to the acts of the president and government, having stated that to blame were also the local organs and especially the regional Soviet, who supported at the emergency session the leaders of the White House. And at the recent Congress of National Deputies of all levels, there was discussion of the fact of creating a new union with the familiar abbreviation SSSR, that is to mean the Saratov Soviet Socialist Republic. The participants in the meeting adopted a resolution to stop the volatile politicians who had transgressed the border of legality. They called all branches of local government to help in conducting re-elections. According to preliminary statistics, the Sociological Institute of the Povolsk Center, they are willing to participate in the re-election are more than 70% of the Saratov citizens. Today in Volgograd, it was expected that two meetings would be conducted today, the bloc of the left forces and the bloc of the democratic organizations. However, the heads of the district appealed to all the citizens and to all the social and political movements in order that they demonstrate restraint and refrain from holding meetings and demonstrations in order not to contribute to the conflagration of passions, as it was said in the statement, not to create a situation of hard resistance and chaos. The left bloc forces cancelled their meeting, and everyone expected that also the other side would do the same. However, in the evening, the Democratic bloc began its meeting on the square of fallen soldiers. The several hundreds who gathered condemned the terror inspired by the former Supreme Soviet and its leaders, and also demanded from the president the most decisive actions to ensure peace and order in Russia. They also demanded from the district administration defense and uninterrupted functioning of all the industries in the engineering communications field. And what concerns the latter, the citizens of Volgograd continue to labor normally and solve their daily problems. On the streets, it is calm. And at the meeting, as it was emphasized, of the district lower Soviet, everyone is awaiting the resolution of the political crisis and the speedy return of peace and accord. This is also awaited by the businessmen. The Association of the Russian Bankers and the Moscow Bank Unions issued a statement today in which it called the president and government to bring order to Moscow and Russia and praised Boris Yeltsin's decree to declare martial law. The bankers offered all representatives of economic structures to make a donation to alleviate the repercussions of the tragic events, not just in organized work, but also in financial compensation for those who were victimized. And now we will go to a report from our close neighbors. What is their opinion of events in Moscow? Today, the Supreme Soviet of Belarus and Stanislav Shushkevich held a briefing for press representing local and foreign media. They stated their support for the President of Russia's acts and said, "This morning I had a meeting with the members of the Presidium, and we came to two conclusions. The first conclusion is obviously that we are extremely worried, and this is very well known. And the second is what we must do. And what we should do is to expedite the work on the designated programs and follow such a path that there would not even be a hint of repeating such turbulence in Belarus." As you know, in Belarus, the Supreme Soviet had demanded that we realize everything that we can for new elections according to the new democratic law, and also to reserve contingency plans which are being examined in the event that we have any unforeseen delays in adopting the new constitution. But this will not create insurmountable obstacles to adopt democratic principles, despite the complexity in the drama. And despite all of the events in Moscow, Belarus, said Shushkevich, Belarus will be faithful to the previously signed accords as well as the accord to form a unified ruble zone. The Belarusians were always very calm and objective people, but this situation will cause them to think, do people think that they can take action by fire and the sword? The President of the Republic of Poland, Lech Walesa, expresses full trust for the President of the Russian Federation. This is according to Associated Press from Warsaw. The President of Slovakia, Mikhail said that he supports the act of Boris Yeltsin and the government. And the government of the Federal Republic of Germany is interested in the continued democratic reform in Russia. This was stated by the Federal Chancellor of the country, Helmut Kohl. The support of the emergency measures taken by the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, were supported in the statement of the President of the USA, Bill Clinton. The opposers of reforms, those who resist a new constitution and don't want elections, were the ones who initiated the force, said Bill Clinton. The European community and the country members affirm support for the acts of Boris Yeltsin in the process of reform, said the ministers of the foreign affairs of 12 countries at the session in Luxembourg. The European community will immediately send Russia medications and supplies in order to aid those who were injured during the clash in Moscow. This is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belgium, Velny-Quas. His words today are of significant weight, for he represents the country which chairs the European community. To the direct question of journalist, do you support force deployed from the side of Boris Yeltsin? He said, yes, we, all the countries of the European community, support Boris Yeltsin in deploying force, the ministers of foreign affairs who have gathered today in Luxembourg. And also, we hope that the number of victims will be reduced to an absolute minimum. Expressing the opinion of the European community, its Commissar on External Affairs, Hans van den Broek, expressed the hope that the violent stage would soon pass and that the election set for December would solve the political crisis by democratic means. As is known, the European North is not yet a member of the European community. However, the position of its countries is not much different from Central Europe. If one speaks specifically about the north of Europe itself, then Finland and its position may be seen as our closest neighbor. Today, with the participation of Finland, there was a government commission's international affairs meeting. You see Maun Koivisto, who is addressing the ministers. According to him, the Prime Minister Esko Aho said that the government, as previously, supports democratic change in Russia and hopes that the current crisis will be resolved with the minimal use of force. One must also note is the interest of press to events in Russia. The newspapers especially emphasize the fact that despite some caution in Helsinki, the armed forces of Finland, located along the border with Russia, which stretches for 1,500 kilometers, are not in the state of military alert. They rather are emphasizing the need for assistance to be sent to Russia. And here is the latest news from Geneva. The International Red Cross in Geneva is organizing emergency shipments of surgical instruments and analgesics to Russia. The emergency cargo will arrive in Moscow by tomorrow. And news again in the Russian capital. At this hour in Moscow in the center, there are around 70 snipers and supporters of the opposition. These are statistics from the Ministry of Defense. The most dangerous parts in the city are the House of Soviets, the whole Международная, the old New Arbat, the region of Sadov Circle, and especially Novinsky Boulevard, the former residence of Tchaikovsky, and the metro Krasnopristyanskaya. 1.5 days may be needed in order to remove the snipers who have lodged themselves in these areas. For this, flying brigades will be formed from the Spetsnaz militia and army divisions. And we call you again to be circumspect, to be cautious, and especially take care of your children. We hope that this night will bring us peace, tranquility, and order. Goodbye.